good evening, one and all. Welcome. Another Sunday evening at the round table where we discuss politics, sports, you name it, all that relevant to Jamaica. Over the months, we have sort of focused on the politics in Jamaica, what's happening there, and we commented quite a lot. This week, we're going to do something sort of different. We're going to look at the story of a Jamaican woman. A Jamaican woman who is considered a very effective person in Jamaican music industry. She's also controversial, very controversial figure. Some allege that she's a control freak. I'm talking about Maxine Stowe, a sister who have achieved a high level of success as a music executive. We're going to spend the next 2 hours exploring with Maxine her journey, how she got started in the Jamaican music industry, what are some of the ups and downs, what are some of the challenges that she faced. And with me on this exploration, we have Brother Lass, as always. We have Brother Herb, Brother Patrick, and we're going to spend the time looking at Maxine, and she's going to educate us about the industry, what you see and what not. Maxine, welcome to the round table. I take it here in Jamaica. How is Jamaica?
Jamaica is good. It's somewhat slow like molasses, but that's good in a fast world sometimes. Not necessarily good for business, but being a product of her diaspora, I'm able to manage or have to manage, the duality of what Jamaica represents, here locally, and the majority of her business, certainly in music, that operates, through her diaspora externally. At the moment, I'm in Cooper's Hill over at a friend's spot. They're having a little function today. So, yeah, I'm high up in the hills, about to, reason with around the round table about my career, my, views, and how they were defined in the music and culture of Jamaica and her diaspora.
Nice. Tell us about yourself, Maxine. How you got started in the reggae industry. But before you go fully into the studio here, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Maxine and what have you?
Okay, I was born to describe myself, I'm a country girl somewhat. I was born in Cromwell, Highgate, St. Mary. Moved to Kingston with my family when I was about 3 years old. Lived in Harborview and what is now Oxford Road, and also lived by Tex Lane. And saying before I moved to America, New York in 1970. I was about 12 years old when I migrated to New York. At that time, I was, in terms of schools, I primarily attended is it Providence Primary, that's in the Ligonier Standpipe area. And then from there I went to Excelsior High School. I was in third form when I left Jamaica to go into New York, the United States. I was a very advanced intellectually. When I left at 12, I had already, as you know, been 3 years in high school. So I entered high school at 9. And in entering high school at 9, I was already repeating 2 years at Providence, meaning I could have entered at 7. But I couldn't, they wouldn't allow me to take the common entrance exam till you're, I think, 11 or 12 years old was the time. And Mr. Powell at Excelsior High School made a provision to allow me to enter that school, and I actually took the common entrance in second form. So my natural intellect, I was just born this way, has really defined my life in a lot of respects. When I entered the States in 1970, my parents had to also fight to get me into high school in America at 12. And they eventually put me in the 9th grade. I had to restart high school, even though I'd been up to third form in high school in Jamaica. So I started back high school 1970 in the Bronx, South Bronx. So 1970, I went to James Monroe High School in the Bronx for about 3 years. And then we moved to Long Island, where I finished high school the last year. It's significant with Long Island because then I went into from a majority Black school into a majority white school. That was a bit strange for me, but I survived. In 1970, when I came into America, I was immediately radicalized. That was the time of the heights of the Black Power movement with Angela Davis and Eldridge Cleaver, the Black Panther Party, etc. I was immediately drawn into those type of social movements as a young person because I was kind of very offended by the racism and the racist attitude that was even put to me in terms of, when I tried to enter school, how I was being categorized. And I think at the time there was a move or a controversy about Blacks being genetically inferior to whites, which was very stark for me as well, that this helped to drive my consciousness a lot because I was so intellectually advanced and fighting all the time to be accepted by the standards that were set for education or entry to education. In fact, when I came to America, they wanted to put me into, maybe because of the environment that I was in, they wanted to put me in like a technical program to do domestic and technical. They didn't want to put me towards the intellectual academics. And yes, so I was radicalized. That's what I know. I literally, in my mind, if I didn't practically, entered the Black Power movement from a preteen. And that was my energy in the Bronx till I entered into Barnard College, Columbia University in 1974. I was about 16 at the time. And in entering Barnard, I chose to study political science I fashioned myself to say I was going to work in the political movements of the time. And at that point, I got introduced to Caribbean political line out of Canada. At the same time, Walter Rodney was also, I think, leaving Tanzania and coming back through the States into the Caribbean, Guyana. Alfred Sears, like most of the top political personalities, I was engaged with. Trevor Monroe out of Jamaica. They were like a class of political thinkers that was part of the Caribbean studies movement. And so even though from 1970 to 74, I was more in the African American space, I would come into Jamaica on vacations, you know, with my family, but my thought processes was more American. And so in going through the political space, at that time also, you had the South African liberation struggles at the time in South Africa and Angola, especially. So I was very involved in those movements on the campus, and got very, you know, linked to that struggle there. Overall, that was a time that I was also introduced to the Rastafari culture in New York, and started to, you know, link with the Rastafari brethren, mostly out of Brooklyn. What is it? Medgar Evers School and Brooklyn College, you know. And the Rastafari culture endeared me because I saw so many of my mentors, you know, struggling in the change activism areas. And actually, to become independent from my parents, who, you know, were alarmed at my associations, and they wanted me to stay at home and go to school. I actually chose Barnard Columbia College because it was the furthest from my home in Long Island, and I was hoping to stay on campus, but they wouldn't allow me. My father would come every evening to to pick me up from school, but you know, I was just very radical from a young person. I do remember, as I'm, you know, talking to you, that Harlem, you know, Barnard College Columbia is right above Harlem. So naturally, my thoughts would, and the way I move, I became very linked into the Black thinkers that were in Harlem, you know, and activists. So my time at Barnard Columbia, which I only spent 2 years there, because I got distracted through my Rastafari energy to actually come into Jamaica in about 1976, ostensibly to enter the ganja trade. I was supposed to be coming in to traffic ganja to get some money so I could become independent of my parents and get my own apartment. Well, in coming into Jamaica, I had a cousin who was also a Rastafarian. And that cousin now, while I'm supposed to be getting myself together to figure out how I'm going to get involved in this trade, my cousin introduced me to Ras Daniel Hartman, who is a leading, who at the time, I didn't know at the time, but I was, he was very much just coming out of starring in the Harder They Come movie as Pedro. and he was a leading Rastafarian and what you call it, pencil drawer in artist in Jamaica. I don't know how they described him, but I mean they described that particular art form. So in linking up with Ras Daniel, he taught me out of doing any kind of ganja trading, and I was enamored with the whole Rastafari culture at its core now, because I'd just been introduced through the political side in America, in Brooklyn. And so I started a journey and a relationship with Ras Daniel. I dropped out of school and went into this deep dive into the Rastafari community and culture of Jamaica. I was about 17, 18 at the time. Ras Daniel now in trading his prints, his well-known famous prints, traded them majoritively through the record distributors in Jamaica. And so I journeyed all over Jamaica with him, you know, trading these prints. And on that journey, I met up with my uncle, the late Sir Coxon Clement Dodd, who had heard of through my mom, his sister, and my
Right there,
grandfather.
Maxine, hold right there before you go into that thing. Let me ask you this. You said you became active, radicalized in the 70s, right?
Yes.
Who were some of the people you said you were involved with? You were involved with Trevor Monroe, Rosie Douglas, and Walter Rodney,
Right.
you said? What were some of the activities you were involved with?
Well, most of it was not what those guys were more in when I entered college in 1974. In 1970 to 1974, obviously I'm a young person at home, so most of my thought processes would have been through what I read, and a couple of the young activists that were in the Bronx at the time. They were actually more, I forgot, they were members of the Black Spades gang in the South Bronx, but they were, you know, radical players. And, you know, so I had a dual side. I had a very smart side where I was, you know, in the honors roll all through high school. You know, I never left the honors roll, but I always cut class and, you know, I was always, you know, trying to find or being attracted to alternative thinkers and spaces. But 1974, when I went into Barnard, Columbia, it was more student activism, as how you would see student activists now, you know, dealing with the Gaza struggle, sit-ins, and just being on top of attending these Caribbean political meetings where they would be studying, you know, because I'm studying political science, so we're studying all these theoretical platforms, you know, preparation for leadership in the Caribbean. That was more what my linkages with these personalities were. I know they ended up, most of them, becoming major political personalities in their various countries. Rosie Douglas, I'm very fond of. He actually became a prime minister of Dominica, you know, as he emerged there. So most of my engagement was intellectual in these meetings, or what you'd call them, training centers, you know, of political thought outside of what classroom studies. So I didn't, you know, like with my most activist spaces were really for the African liberation movement you know, the MPLA in Angola. You know, I worked with Bob Van Leerup, who was very close to who became president of Angola. So we would be in a lot of fundraising activities, you know, raising funds for the liberation movement in Angola, you know, and yeah, just being very activist that way. And then, like I said, with the Rastafari community, it was the same type of energy. Now that I'm focused on that, you're just, you know, kind of preparing yourself either to go and take over these countries or, you know, it was very much like that, you know.
Okay, I want to open up the discussion to the other members before you go into the studio one aspect of your journey.
Okay.
Brothers, we have Maxine. You heard the foundation from which she emerged. What what say you? Any question for her? Yes?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, not yet.
Patrick?
yeah. I've a comment and possibly a question. Um, yeah, Maxine, very interesting. You know what seems pretty clear as you explain your journey is that you came into the U.S. at a time when a real important time. You have to mention in terms of the difficulties you had in terms of what they wanted you to pursue and what challenges you came up against that move you in a direction of pursuing political science. And what comes to mind for me is it was also the period where there was a great suppression of the Black Panther movement coming out of the late 60s, and most of those brothers was in prison. And right around
Incarcerated.
that time is when the women in the Panther movement really started to assume some leadership roles and trying to keep the Panthers organized and so on. So it was a real interesting time all around, not just the Caribbean people coming into the US and meeting up on these experiences, but also in the US here with the Black struggle and so on. So my question to you is, can you tell us more about some of the activities, the specific activities that you got involved in with right in that period? Right, you mentioned the Angola situation and so on, but anything else that jumps out that you could share with us?
No, you have to remember that I was 12 years old when I
Yeah,
came
but
to
I'm thinking about
America.
the later years
Oh,
in
the
terms of the
1974.
barnyard. Yeah.
Yes, the Barnard years. Well, I was, yes, 16 at the time, a little bit more mature, but still being held tightly by my parents.
Mhm.
But it was more meetings, right? And trying to get more, what do you call it? Like more support, whether it's political support through the awareness of building awareness in communities, for governmental actions or activities at the time. So it was more solidarity and lifestyle, at the time. I remember the Black Muslims also, pushing buy Black, live Black. Um, I remember the music, the African American music at the time, the Nina Simone's, the Last Poets, the jazz um, environment. So it was more building understanding and strength amongst the people because, as you said, and that was part of why I was attracted to Rastafari was there was a lot of suppression of Black thinkers going to jail. Even, you know, Angela Davis, who was a female mentor of mine, you know, and I think Tupac's mom, you know, it was very harsh. You know, most of the people that I was attracted to and felt could create change politically. You know, that was my experience, was that through our intelligence and through presenting the facts, that we would be able to enact change. And then, you know, of course, that wasn't happening. And, you know, there was a whole idea of that where we have to do armed struggle, you know? And so it was just that period of me not being personally too active other than on these settings, because again, I was being, you know, held tightly as much as possible by my parents, you know, and my home life. So, you know, my activism was more when I was in school, you know, the school hours, after school hours, you know, and really, like I said, breaking through, you know, getting into Jamaica and being, you know, coming up more now in the Rastafari movement, as I got somewhat disillusioned by what my mentors were going through, you know, a lot of imprisonment. Eventually, as you know, Walter Rodney was killed. That was a major time for me, because he was like the top scholar in my mind and top advocate that I felt change would occur, especially when he returned to the Caribbean. And so, you know, I did go through a space where I got attracted more to the spiritual revolution of the Rastafari culture, because the political one was challenging for me. Another part that I saw was when we did travel through these revolutionary movements, that once revolutionary leaders became in power, there was another contradiction that seemed to occur when power was taken, that they themselves, or a couple of them, I don't remember them right now, but I remember the feeling that once you took power, it was different. It was a difference from when you were fighting for power. You know, it seemed that once you took power, you had to, you know, somewhat join the system, you know, because or change the way that you did things, and a lot of contradictions came in that respect as well, you know, for me as a thinker, you know, as to what to do, you know. So I do remember in doing my deep dive into the Rastafari culture, it was to protect my emotional feelings about, you know, not losing hope based on where I saw things not go, you know. Yeah.
Herb,
Interesting.
Herb, you have a question?
Maxine,
Very
in
good.
terms of the
Can you hear me, Maxine?
Yes, I'm hearing
in
you.
terms of the music at the time, Maxine, what was the Caribbean music scene like in the States at the time? And was there any kind of inkling or interest that, you know, made you feel that you would go into this, you would see this area as a career? Or was it, you know, after Daniel Hartman that really spurred that feeling of interest in the music business?
Well, prior to going into Jamaica, my interest in the music was African American. And it was really to how the African American music was involved in the activism. So I remember not being in the industry, but being closely aligned with artists like the Last Poets, you know, Gil Scott Heron group, a lot of the jazz musicians at the time. These were all persons who were in the making of the music. You know, it was activist music. You know what I mean? So I wasn't interested in the business of music at all at that time, but I was closely aligned with musicians who were activists, and it was all African American. I wasn't until I got back into Jamaica and somewhat at the edge of the Caribbean activism, because I remember that was the time I met actually Ken Williams, because the Caribbean students or associations would now be, you know, linked towards the music. But I don't in my mind remember any kind of real linkage with the music, Jamaican Caribbean music at that time. It was strictly the African American activist artists linked to the Black Power movement in New York.
Herb,
Yeah.
Maxine, welcome and welcome to your audience, Mike, and to all my fellow panelists. Maxine, it's interesting because what age did you actually leave Jamaica?
1970, so I would have been 12 years old.
12 years old. About the same age as Patrick Ewing leaving and coming up to Massachusetts. But let me ask you this. Do you feel that your Jamaican value system, your Jamaican upbringing, clashed in any way with the radicalism of that time? And was it difficult for you to make a transition in listening to some of these folks? Or was it easy based on the fact that you felt you had suffered in your homeland before you came up here?
Yes, I was in Jamaica as a young person. You know, I was aware of colorism, right? And I was aware of poverty. And as a young person, I remember being someone who stole money from my parents to give to my friends at school who couldn't afford lunch, you know? So I was born with this kind of sensitivity towards, you know, our consciousness, you know, social consciousness. And I was aware of the colorism of, you know, persons with higher color seeming to have a, you know, a difference. But I was more aware of poverty in Jamaica and very conscious of it, of who had and who hadn't. I didn't really formalize any political, you know, thought about it. But that prepared me, because when we moved to the South Bronx, it was still a kind of ghetto, not ghetto, full ghetto, but the ghettoized inner city surrounded you, and in the schools, you know, it was very much there, you know, in the South Bronx. So it was more my intelligence that radicalized me, I think, for America, because of that theme that was running, that blacks were genetically inferior to whites. It you know, it troubled me a lot, you know, as a young person, just coming in, and just the racism, you know, beginning to see and feel the effects of racism, of feeling that other that I didn't feel in Jamaica, that I now felt in the United States.
Now,
So
stick a pin there for a second. Now, were you alone, or did you find there were other Jamaicans or even other fellow Caribbean people who you admired and who you could make friends with and felt the same way and could perform in the same fashion? In other words, organize in the same fashion to get things done.
No, it was very much, I guess, to where I lived, and my peers were very African American, you know. It was, I didn't have a lot of Jamaican, um, associates. The only time I got back into Jamaica is when, into my Jamaicanness, was when I went home.
Oh, we just lost
Mm.
lost her.
Yeah,
Okay.
We lost you.
yeah,
We
so
lost
I
you
was
for a little
then
bit.
I don't know. Yes, I didn't have any Jamaican peers or any Caribbean peers as I grew up as a teenager in the Bronx. It was all Black American, even at the school. It was completely Black American until that period in my college life when I got linked to the Caribbean Students Association studies,
So, so would it,
Students Association.
so would it be accurate to say then that you never really got involved organizationally as well because of the youthfulness of your surroundings?
Yes, not until I went into college. In my high school years, there was no ability to really join. I mean, the only time I was around my peers, like I said, was on that level, was if I cut classes and we went and hung out somewhere, and it was more in remembering it, it was more with the Black Spades gang, even though I don't remember that gang being my association with those members, were they were more political than I never saw the criminal side then. You know what I mean? It was more akin to the Black Panthers, that kind of energy around them. And my neighbors, we were in apartments. It was like a 3-story apartment, and my neighbors downstairs or upstairs were mostly, again, Black Americans. I remember them being going to the war. I don't remember if it was the Vietnam War, but there's a lot of tension about Black people being conscripted um, to fight in the wars, and a lot of them came back. I remember very radicalized themselves. They had gone, and fought in the war, and when they came back home, the racism that they met, I remember being close to someone like that, that also impacted me as well. But it was strictly um, from a Black American perspective, that in those years I was formally, radicalized. And like I said, it's more these type of associations.
So
No,
Maxine, you finish Arab? Go ahead, Arab.
I was going
Maxine,
to
what
ask her.
time?
Maxine, you talk a lot about being radicalized. Okay, how far were you prepared to go as a radical? I mean, could you really hurt somebody back in the day if you felt it was encroaching on the sisterhood or brotherhood that you were associated with? How did you feel back then?
Yeah, I felt that way um because of the challenges that were facing you, the activists.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having, especially in my mind, that MPLA poster with the mother with the child on her back and the machine gun, you know, in front, you know what I mean? So the women, you know, were called upon and were on the front line of the struggle. So, you know, I know that this was some of the most alarming time for my parents, you know what I mean, in terms of what they saw I was trending towards. But there wasn't really any activation for me, but I would have to answer you in the positive, because these were the not that you wanted to do it, but you were prepared to defend yourself, and you would have to be trained in that manner. You understand what I'm saying? You couldn't be an activist and then, like, you know,
And didn't
you're not,
follow. Didn't
and
have
didn't
any
follow
follow.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
What were your parents straight-laced in that sense? Were they just maybe church-going people who just wanted to quote the Bible like if it came around to it, or what?
No, they were my father was pretty they were pretty, what I'd call, not, they were Christian, but they weren't practicing Christians.
Okay.
And that wasn't the deal for us, you know, in the home, you know what I mean? All I know that they had to deal with me is my intellect being ahead of my age. You understand?
Right.
And they had that struggle with me from a child, being so precocious and not interested in things that my age group was interested in, you know. So I was never interested in dolls. I was never interested in, you know, in those kind of young people things. By the time I was a teenager, you know, the people that I was interested to speak to or associate with were oftentimes older than me and oftentimes male, you know. And it wasn't sexual, but it was political. You know, these are the thinkers and these are the people that you know are in the movement. So
What,
I actually felt more tension with my parents. I feel sorry now, you know, in retrospect, what I put them through.
Put them
were you
through.
an only child?
Huh?
Were you an only child?
No, I had an older brother, and a younger brother and a younger sister. My older brother was intellectual like myself, but he was 2 years older than me. And then, but he was totally intellect. He became an aeronautical engineer. He was just involved in the sciences and smart and, you know, exhibiting all of that. In fact, he and I split up emotionally from I was about 12, 13, from we went into America because of my radical leanings, and my friends were much different from him, you know, and his friends. And so we actually didn't speak for the majority of my high school years because I was so inclined, you know. So yeah, I was the only one in my family like this, very straight, you know.
So
Very Maxine.
you could have been a physician or a lawyer or anything else you wanted to be then with that intellect.
Yeah, anything at all. I had what they call like a photographic memory. I know my brother studied. I didn't study anything. I just attended classes and made sure I took all my tests and was in the A student. That was part of my challenge with him. I didn't have, he had to study and he was smart at it, but I just didn't have to study. I don't know what is, you know, somebody would have to assess me to understand what was happening with me. Later on, persons would say, well, oh, she must have a photographic memory, or, you know, something of that level that would allow me to be so casual about my knowledge, but be able to exercise it at such a high level at the time, you know, that it was required. But yeah, so it made a difference, even within my home, about my intellect, you know, and how it was used or how it was associated. Because I had my brother to be compared to at all times. You know what I mean? Where he was very straightforward and, you know,
Yeah.
straight laced.
So by 76, you were back in Jamaica. You met
Yes.
Daniel Hartman, who introduced you to Cox and Dot. Pick up the story from him.
Yes. Two things. Hartman introduced me to Cox and Dodd, and on the same journey, maybe months apart, he also introduced me to the late Honorable Bunny Whaler. In Cox and Dodd, I got to meet him at that time, and we exchanged our relationship stories, you know, about his father, my grandfather, my
Can you say
mother.
who Cox? Can you say who Coxon does is a little bit for those
Uh,
who might not know?
okay, right. Clement Coxon Dodd, he's a Jamaican music pioneer, noted to be one of the foundation of the Jamaican music from the sound system era, along with Duke Reed. Their competitiveness is known to have sparked the local recording industry, and he went on to be the first Black man to own a recording studio and label in Jamaica, Studio One, also known as Jamaica Recording and Publishing Studio Limited. And his studio has the
Brentford Road.
largest, 13 Brentford Road,
Hmm.
and his studio was like the Motown of Jamaica, and he had the largest, possibly has the largest catalog and blueprint of Jamaican music, from the Scatterlights to the Wailers to the Burning Spears, Marcia Griffiths, Sugar Minot, who became, you know, my late husband and children, you know, father of my children, and Dennis Brown, you know, just a who is who of Jamaican music and genres, you know, ska, rocksteady, reggae, and dancehall. So in that context, when I met him, again, at that time, it was just familial, just connecting, not so much with his music history, but his our family linkage that would then spur our coming together, not in Jamaica in music, but in New York. Fundamental about Ras Daniel would again be his introduction to me to Bunny Whaler. In introducing to Bunny Whaler, he was to the visit and introduction was about Ras Daniels. He was supposed to be doing the artwork for Bunny's second album after Black Art Man, I think the protest album. So in what my life became to be, it was my Rastafari engagement, especially through Ras Daniel Hartman, that introduced me to two pillars that would become two pillars of my music journey. In leaving Ras Daniel Hartman after about a year and a half in Jamaica, and the clashes that were happening mentally for me, because in accepting the depth of the Rastafari culture, I had to compromise and suppress a lot of my political knowledge, you know, and experience in favor of identification with the Rastafari culture. Especially, I remember we were active in the war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. at the time when I was in college, I had a lot of friends that were Eritreans, and they were very much opposed to the Emperor Haile Selassie's governance in Ethiopia. So there was a lot of mental gymnastics, I'd have to call it, that occurred
Contradictions.
a lot of contradictions that I had to walk through willingly, in my initial sojourn into the Rastafari culture, that ended up into a major mental break for me after a while. It actually occurred after the 1970s, July 7th, 1977, when the 4/7s clashed. There was a lot of expectation leading up to that date. A lot of what they call it, millennial thinking that a lot of changes would have happened in Jamaica and in the world, in that journey. And it was interesting musically what was happening with me with Ras Daniel Hartman. I remember.
Maxine, just hold a minute for a minute. I want to bring Brother Will Ratigan into the conversation. Ratigan, welcome, brother. Right? We have Maxine as our special guest today, and we're going on a journey with her. So I hope you have some question for Maxine. All right? Sister Maxine, continue.
And Maxine, tell him you want to hear that deep, sexy voice he uses on the radio last night.
Maxine, continue, Maxine, continue.
No,
So you have to give up. You have to give up the radical side in order to be part of the Rasta movement. That's what you're saying, right? Go ahead.
Yes, and as a woman too, because in the Rastafari, the Rastafari culture required the woman to be in the background, and that was a struggle for me because I wanted to be involved in all of the reasonings as a political activist. And it was, a lot of tensions amongst the brethren as I gave my opinions and so on and so forth. But, for whatever reason, I went into this mode, I was somewhat protecting my emotions, when I look back. However, I was just bringing in the issue with the Nyabingi order and the Nyabingi music versus even the 12 tribes of Israel. That was the more prominent group amongst young people and intellects at the time. And being around Ras Daniel Hartman, we would burn a fire on the 12 tribe movement and the music at the time. I remember even Bob Marley, being seen at the time as a sellout, of the Rastafari Nyabingi order in terms of music and what was happening. And it was a challenging time for me also within the Rastafari culture. Being with Ras Daniel, who also was straddling the Nyabingi or the energy because of his involvement, I got to understand in the harder they come, and being one of those popular culture or seen as a popular culture figure, even though he stood more formally with the Nyabingi order, So I did along in my journey with Ras Daniel also, walk some of the contradictions within the Rastafari community itself as to, what was the core or what was happening with reggae, because the elders were somewhat, dubious about the reggae industry and how it was changing the Rastafari cultural mores, and being attached, I guess, to the music industry, because being an artist or a reggae artist, Rastafari artist, your allegiance or your ideas are going to be more aligned with the aims and objectives of the music industry, you know, as you try to be successful. So there's a lot of compromising that would occur. And the elders, even though the music was promoting the culture globally, it was also allowing a lot of dilution of the standards. And a lot of that dilution was reflected in the 12 tribe at the time. I mean, I came into a whole nother experience as I entered the music industry, but I was just expressing what I actually experienced with Ras Daniel relating to music, and what eventually I would experience with the late Honorable Bunny Wailer, as he, as one of the foundation member of the Wailers, made certain specific choices in relation to his career and what he wouldn't choose to do, or, you know, trying to straddle that being Rastafari and being in the music as well. So those contradictions boiled up for me in about 1978, and I had to leave Ras Daniel and return quite dramatically, back to New York, back to Babylon, you know, because I had totally shed everything Babylon, you know, and a lot of principles of Babylon that I would have to return to. I had a break, a mental break, but it wasn't, again, I would have to give my intelligence the reason for me not to have lost it totally.
What year are we talking? What year are we talking about? Around that period?
77, 1970, the latter part of 77 going into 78, right?
Okay.
This was after the 4-7 clash, July 7th, 1977, and the whole expectation of change in Jamaica. You know, looking back now, I see that it had a lot to do with, and merged a lot to do with the political violence also in Jamaica at the time. As you know, the recent Bob Marley One Love movie captured that whole 76 to 78, you know, period in a different way. But it was a lot of, you know, tension I wasn't aware of. But in retrospect now, I understand what, you know, I was living through. So my return into back into Babylon, New York, was dramatic and psychiatric, you know. I went through a heavy mental trying to get back to myself, or back to something normal. I wouldn't even say normal, back to surviving Babylon. I ended up at a psychiatrist because I couldn't re-engage, and I'd lost a significant amount of weight. I was, you know, I'd smoked inordinate amounts of ganja over the last period, you know, which did have an effect on me, you know, mentally, as I tried.
Much at the time? Were you eating a normal, nourishing meal?
I wasn't eating much either at the time. And at the time, with Ras Daniel, we had moved from a neighborhood to the Bull Bay. So I was on the beach at this time. And so living on the beach side with the sea and the ocean, and, you know, as a Rastafari at that time, there was no mirrors in the house. It was a very ascetic experience, you know, withdrawal, you know, from quote unquote Babylon. And so the sky was my television, you know, no radio, no nothing, no, you know, too much contact with the news of the world. And so there was a very deep withdrawal, you know, aided now by the ganja smoking, you know, in terms of going deep, 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 you know. And so to reconstruct, because then, you know, when I said the 4/7s clashing, that was the whole concept of repatriation. You know, that is the driving center of Rastafari philosophy, is the repatriation to Africa, back home to Africa. And that would be coming not by political means, but that would be coming by spiritual engagement, that you have to prepare yourself psychologically and physically for. You know, your whole lifestyle is to prepare you for this repatriation, you know. And so understanding now that the world, you know, would have to, you know, you have to re-enter the world. I didn't understand. I'm being moved towards this scenario, you know, not to go completely crazy, and had to find my way back into some form of survival, you know. So anyway, I went to the psychiatrist, was taken there by my parents, and they gave me some psychotic type medicine as I was exhibiting, you know, some amount of loss of control of my thoughts and stuff. However, the medicine seemed to make me more crazier. And so, again, in engaging the psychiatrist, he said, well, I needed more talk therapy. And he engaged me in the talk therapy and found that I was very understanding of my position. And then he prescribed that I should get a journal and start writing, because he said that you understand everything that's happening to you and what's going on with you, but you have too much things in your brain that you have to let out. And so they took me off of the medication, and my medication now was therapy and writing, right? And that therapy and writing calmed me down. And again, I was able to meet a couple of people in Brooklyn that kind of was molding me back to, you know, Rastafari ones, actually, that was molding me back into my, you know, I could be Rastafari and I could still live in, you know, in foreign. I didn't have to be in the Jamaica setting and all of that. And eventually I applied back to school, NYU, New York University. I was accepted. I said, because of the writing, I said, okay, I was going to now do journalism. And as I was accepted, I'm preparing myself now to do the journalism and enter back school, I happened to meet up with my uncle in Brooklyn, and he invited me to open up his distribution company in Brooklyn, as he himself was now transitioning out of Jamaica.
What year was this? What year?
This is 1978. I would have been coming back into New York at that time, and going through my psychological, period in the early 1978, late 1977, early 1978, preparing myself to go back into college, would have been September of that year, right? But this would have been now the summer. I was working at a friend's restaurant in Brooklyn, to kind of acclimatize myself, to dealing with people and, getting back my flow. And a record shop, Tanker Records, that was really the outlet for Channel One on Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, was next door to the record shop, to the restaurant. And so we struck up a relationship. And then that person who ran that record shop, Tanker, knew my uncle and said, oh, when he comes back in, he would introduce us. And so it was over the summer of 78 that that introduction occurred. And then I made the decision to, instead of going back to school, to open and operate my uncle's distribution in Jamaica, in Brooklyn. That decision I had as a emotional decision, where I felt I would remain close to my Jamaican experience. And it was very therapeutic for me, the music of Studio One, because it was the history of the music that I was now involved in, the deep, Scatterlights, that's where I met Roland Alfonso, Jackie Mitu, those early pioneers that were still very much, alive and involved with my uncle. I remember Roland Alfonso working out of, he always sold records at Apache Fish and, Cross and Fish, the one on Nostrand Avenue. So that was another familiarizing of my inner self, linking into Jamaica. And my spirit felt that to be more therapeutic than going back into the university space. And I just felt comfortable, and that's my entry into the Jamaica music industry. Obviously, I learned the whole history of the Jamaica music industry through setting up of Coxson's Music City in Brooklyn. We started at his friend's.
Maxine, just hold up in. Any question for Maxine? No comments? Any question?
I wanted to ask the side. It's amazing because during the time you were there, were you in Queens at Cambria Heights?
I was living in Long Island, in Elmont. Long Island.
Okay.
What is interesting, as you brought up Queens, is that both Coxson and this is the move of all the top Jamaican companies out of Jamaica into New York, because who also moved at this time was Randy's.
Randy VP,
and Channel One was 1 foot out already with the distribution on Utica Avenue. But the reason you mentioned Queens, and I had to make that understanding that at the same time is when I had that fundamental relationship with VP Records, with Chris Chin, because we would both meet up at John F. Kennedy Airport, bringing in the records from Jamaica that were being pressed in Jamaica and distributed in New York, which changed the whole Jamaican music industry into dancehall. That's where that's the roots of dancehall had a lot to do with that migration of the music companies into New York. So inadvertently, even though I didn't know that that was what was happening with me and my uncle, that was also the roots of what was about to happen for Jamaican music.
Now, I was going to tell you that at that time, from 1976 to 79, for 3 years, I was the official U.S. Army recruiter for that area.
Ah,
So
okay.
if you ever run into an army guy trying to recruit you or anybody else around there that's close to you, and that blue army car government vehicle I used to drive all around there. I recruited
Okay.
at all the high schools, Andrew Jackson, Springfield High. As a matter of fact, I was playing ball with Real Kareem, which is Maka, Lloyd Walker. And his shop was out there on that main road in Kimber Heights, Linden Boulevard. And if you remember all of that.
Okay. Okay. I was about to say that they were trying, I know the CIA was trying to recruit me in college.
I could have told you that. I was going to save that for last. You would have been a good infiltrator. Plus, at the time, they were raising hell down in Jamaica.
So Maxine,
Yes.
so Maxine, so now you're involved in the music industry at that point. That's where you started, okay?
Yeah, that's where I started.
With distribution.
Operating. Yeah, operating Coxson's Music City. I was moving around because I had to find a plug.
Yeah. So tell us about the journey. You know, you're involved in the music. Tell us the music now, the industry.
Well, with the industry,
your involvement.
My involvement started with operating the distribution for Mr. Dodd. So I would have to learn everything now about manufacturing of records, you know, where the manufacturers are of the vinyl and the CDs. I also have to learn the whole layout of the record stores in the Bronx, in the Brooklyn, Queens, because I physically have to drop off records every weekend, different from shipping and all of that. I had to learn all of the mastering studios in in and around New York to manage the tape, making the stampers and making the masters. And eventually, in working with especially Jackie Matu at the time, I began to understand now the recording studios in Brooklyn. We met up with Bulwackies. I did a lot of early work with Bulwacky Studio in the Bronx. And Brad's Records was a major learning spot as well, in doing my Dancehall 50 project about the history, how dancehall and the sound system developed hip hop and all of that, I would understand now what was happening in the Bronx musically. So my experience at Studio One was fundamental to my understanding of how the Jamaican music industry developed and affected, the global industry. I learned everything about music production and the channels for manufacturing and distribution, and how our diaspora became so essential in people like myself who grew up amongst the Black American community, why many of us would emerge to be major hip-hop artists and not Jamaican artists, even though we carry our Jamaican culture. So people like Busta Rhymes, Biggie Smalls, Heavy D, you know, artists who have deep Jamaican backgrounds, but are essentially known as hip hop artists. I would understand all of that now from my own, you know, experience of the music industry and my own personal life, you know, which is why I'm championing Dancehall 50, as you know, Michael. It's almost a story of my life, you know, my life journey. So yes, the Studio One was a learning of the local Jamaican music industry. And from there, I also began to understand the industry in the UK as well, London, based on the trade that we did with London and my eventual travel into London. Yeah. So
what other
yeah,
labels you work with? What other labels did you work with?
Well, from Studio One, remember that is where I now met Sugar Minot as one of the last artists that worked with Mr. Dodd. And coincidentally now, or you know, synergistically, it was also where the rhythm, you know, his work with Mr. Dodd he's the first artist to record directly on rhythms and which was a precursor for the dancehall genre. So my work with Sugar Minot now, I produced my first album, Roots Lovers, with him. He was just coming in from England, becoming an independent producer artist himself. And we started to work now actually with Jackie Mitu and with Bulwaki in the creation of that album. And that's when I got pregnant with my first child, Rashim, and had to make the decision because of my relationship in running Cox's Music City. I had to make the decision to go and work with Sugar and his Black Roots and Youthman Promotion label. So I left my uncle and went to work
in Jamaica.
In Jamaica, but really traveling between Jamaica, New York, and London. So my experience with Sugar was again building on what I developed at Studio One. I traveled, you know, the diaspora markets in order to fulfill, you know, and facilitate that label. From there, I went and worked with Sugar. I went in 1987. Sugar, I started 1980. So about 1987, that's when I went to work with Skeng Don, Kenneth Black in Miami, operating his studio and label in Miami for about a year and a half. He returned to Jamaica shortly thereafter. And that's when I went to work for VP Records directly now in 89. And while working at VP Records, this was the crossover now of the dancehall artists, Shabba Ranks, the beginning of reggaeton with El General, dancehall reggae Espanol, and Super Cat, you know, all these guys I was working with at Skengdon. Moved into VP. At VP, I was involved also in transitioning VP from a just a distributor to actually a distributor and a label where they actually started to, you know, sign artists, license material other than just straight distribution. And in 1990, I started working at the international label Columbia Records, where I, established the reggaeton first, a compilation called Dancehall Reggae Espanol with El General and mostly artists out of Panama, and doing Jamaican, covering Jamaican songs in Spanish. And I signed Supercat, Cobra, Diana King, Aina Kamosi, like a whole slew of artists in that crossover period. Had several successes with soundtracks like Cool Runnings, Bad Boys, the first Bad Boy in the Will Smith movie series, and had a major, expansion of what they call 90s dancehall at that time. Shabba Ranks and Patra were signed at the sister label Epic. So at what is called Sony owned both Columbia Records and Epic. We had the cream of the crop of the 90s dancehall crossing over. I also started working with Jimmy Cliff at the time. His song, I Can See Clearly Now, was a hit single globally for the Cool Running soundtrack. And in about 1995, I left Columbia to work at Island Records with Sly and Robbie, and did the Dancehall Queen movie and soundtrack. We created a breakthrough for Beanie Man, and he did his hit single, Who Am I, etc. for VP Records. And then what we did there again, and at Island is where I reissued the whole Bob Marley catalog, and we did with Stephen Marley. I did the Chant Down Babylon, co-executive producer, Chant Down Babylon duets album with Bob Marley and Lauryn Hill, Busta Rhymes, and a slew of urban hip-hop acts and singers. Then from that I signed, we did a label deal at Motown Records, still under the Universal umbrella. Universal owned Island as well. And we signed Stephen Marley and Damian Marley, where we did the Halfway Tree album. And I had just finished doing actually the Third World Cop movie and soundtrack right in between that for Chris Blackwell, who had left Island to start Palm Pictures. That, at the end of that period, I actually returned to work with my uncle, who was supposedly signing a deal with Virgin Records to license some of his catalog. And that didn't emerge. I had moved back into Jamaica with my uncle. This was 2002, 2003. And the deal fell through, and my uncle died in 2004. So from 2004, I became very involved in just trying to structure the Jamaican space, mostly focused on trying to get a Jamaica music museum would represent the history of Jamaican music and catalogs in a unique way to reattach itself to the international industry as a major company or major entity. And got involved now with intellectual property rights of music and culture. Started doing a lot of work with the World Intellectual Property Organization. That led me back to the Rastafari community, intellectual property rights, and defining those rights as a major pillar and stakeholder of Jamaican music became my focus. And because of that work, that led me to my a decade worth of work surrounding the late Honorable Bunny Wailer and his catalog rights in the Wailers, for the Wailers name and to be associated with the Wailers catalog. You know, the early Wailers, the trio. And yeah, have just been involved over the period with that level of Jamaican music. You know, trying to, what you call it now, define the music in a way that more of the value could be transmitted back into Jamaica, seeing that our structure developed externally in New York and in England, where the majority of the value of the music, you know, resides there. The percentages that artists carry home, that is the majority of what the earning is, you know, locally. And, you know, not much ability also to earn from the merchandising of our music and culture globally.
Maxine,
Right.
Maxine, can you just hold it there and get some feedback from the others? Yeah, but the work that she outlines
Yes,
a lot
that's
of
fine.
work. A lot of work, you know, a lot of work because I know Alpha Tree was a Grammy album. How many Grammys are you associated with, Maxine?
Yes.
How many Grammys?
Well, I know I was personally nominated for a compilation, Stir It Up, in the 90s. That was as an executive producer. But I'm not sure. I can't tell you Grammy-wise, you know, how many different projects I'm associated with. Indirectly, you know, as A&R or, you know, executive producer. I have about 12 to 14, what do you call it? RIAA plaques of, you know,
Gentlemen,
globally with.
any question for Maxine? Feedback, anything?
Yeah. Maxine, with regards to the, you know, you from your story outline, you're pretty much at the point now where you're looking at copyrights and well, overall property rights and all of that, and the whole value system with the music industry. Can you speak more on that, particularly as it pertains to Jamaica and how Jamaica can benefit and what stage of development it is at now with, you know, with Jamaica?
Well, what I've learned is I pretty much became involved now with the ganja industry for the last 10 years, which mirrors very much the Jamaican industry, the music industry. And it taught me, I think the ganja is what brought home the concept of size and market and how disadvantaged we are because of, you know, even though we like to say, oh, we look about with Talawa, because we don't have size and because we don't have market, a local market, we are at the behest of international dynamics. And we haven't integrated that into our analysis of development. I know there's a lot of focus on foreign direct investment, but I am still trying to understand how domestically independent we can become based on those realities. The fact that we have a large diaspora, we had to have a large diaspora. We are a migrating economy. We have to migrate our people. It's not something that you're choosing. It's something that is fundamentally involved in your architecture as a society to survive. Yet we don't have the mechanism. We're not engaged. I guess now, you know, Mr. Rattigan is on, so he's in the midst of that dynamic of the diaspora and its relation locally, you know. But, you know, the Rasta man always said, never give away a continent for an island. And I understand that intrinsically now, as I am part of, or want to be part of, the African music industry explosion that's happening globally, know how we as a culture and a music have fertilized. We have fertilized a lot of music around the world, but in particular, because of our history with Africa, you know, I'm observing the type of deals and the type of infrastructure that's being built around African music that is not able to be built around Jamaican music because of size, you know? And, you know, you can have problems and you can solutionize, but you can only solutionize if you recognize the problem. And that's the thing that I'm grappling with now myself. How do you solutionize these realities economically on behalf of our people, African descendants, people who are majoritively the creators of this culture, and their lack of capital in Jamaica and their extensive earning externally? And how do you manage this as a society when the mechanisms that you need to do so politically, you don't want to do it? It's not with the political structure to do so. So,
so if I'm understanding you correctly, it comes down to it's really a hands-on learning in terms of really managing the whole structure. Because my take on that is, and to answer your question, the music industry, like you said, the ganja industry mirrors the music industry somewhat, right? And when you look at what happens across the board, right, wherever it is, whether it is through legitimate trade or through illegitimate trade or through non-traditional trading, what happens is that we always move to the dictates of the old colonialists, because they are the ones who really establish everything, and therefore they are the ones who control the market and determine everything about the business. In other words, they just the same way the sugar industry developed, right, is the same way the music industry would develop, right? If it's coming out of Jamaica, it means that, okay, Jamaica produces it, and then they take control of it in terms of the marketing and the distribution and so on, right? Now, from what you explained with your experience and setting up the distribution for your uncle, right, for Coxsone, right, as a starting point, because of course that becomes the starting point when they move the operations from Jamaica into New York, because it was a matter of trying to break into a bigger market. But they also became subjected to the dictates of the
America.
organization here, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
from what I'm getting from what you're saying is moving all of that back to Jamaica, right? For us to really realize more in terms of our value from it. And that would require Jamaican laws to be structured around that. It would require the Jamaican government to really have a vested interest in seeing the whole thing develop industrially, because the way in which it is
Yes.
always done is through laws. That's
Yes.
how they control, right? That's how the colonialists has
Mm-hmm.
always controlled. Right? Everything is done
Mm-hmm.
through laws. That is why it is so important for us to look at things like constitution and structure and so on, right? Because what happens is that with the ignorance of the Jamaican government, right, and the lack of interest, because of course they don't see the value, right, and they don't understand the colonial control, right? They are only concerned with what is immediately before them, and of course the music is not what's there before them. The Jamaican artist is not concerned about the organizational side and the control and all of that. He's more concerned about the earnings, right? So nobody has a vested interest in terms of the control, right? The distribution, the industry itself, right? And therefore, what happens is that it leaves the old colonialists to keep controlling everything, right? Because they have the market, right? And then they also have the know-how in terms of how you set up the structure and all of that. Now, this is where I think, you know, you are on the right track in terms of moving stuff back to Jamaica, but where what needs to be done is to generate the structure in Jamaica, right? To ensure control, not just with the music itself, but with it with everything around the
Laws.
industry, merchandise,
Mm-hmm.
everything, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
structural laws and all of that, because it means that it would be a product being exported from Jamaica, owned by Jamaica, exporting from Jamaica, right? And therefore,
But
control of it is dictated by Jamaica.
If in fact I told you about the Rastaman philosophy of never giving away a continent for an island. I know you know about the PJ Patterson Potentially Institute at UA that is focused on African Caribbean trade, and you know how Jamaica as a country should have been incorporated in the South-South dynamic, which we had the opportunity to do that from the 1960s when we were being independent, again because of the Rastafari focus on Africa. There was a mission to Africa, very noted mission, where government and Rastafari brethren and civil society, upon the independence of the nation, went into Africa to seek alliances in relation to us becoming actually a founding member of the Organization of African Unity. In retrospect, the value of, you know, which is what points me now to what is happening with the African music industry. And it's in, you know, and seeing the type of deals that are being made by the international companies that were not made with Jamaica primarily because of size, right? Africa is at the same point that we were, in that we, you know, the sale of African music is going global is enormous. But the companies are investing millions and millions of dollars in Africa. They're transferring best practices. They're transferring technology into Africa, right? And the African, like a country like Nigeria that is a leading country out of Africa in this transition, they have over 200 million people, right? And range of Africa is next, Ghana, right? And we ourselves are very instrumentally, culturally aligned with those markets. And it's interesting to think about it because our influence, where our diaspora has been in America and Europe, we are now groups, you know, these markets that was a mainstay for us. We have so influenced them that they have now created their own reggae groups, their own music industry, their own sound systems, their own ecosystem built off of our blueprint. And we are not benefiting, you know, I like I said, I'm in the middle.
But they're not alone, because think about Japan and the dancer.
Well, I was about to say exactly, you know.
You know.
So I'm saying now, if I'm a thinker, political, I am a thinker, political thinker, and I'm a creator. My family bloodline is highly involved in this blueprint, and yet is suffering, you know, economically from all of this that I see. I'm very invested in finding a solution, you know.
Question.
You know, I only know that Jamaica last year for the first has signed the Madrid Protocol. You know, they're signing these intellectual property policies and platforms.
But they don't know what they're signing.
They don't know what they're signing, and it's not retroactive to protect what has gone on before. That is evergreen. That means to say whatever you created before is going to continue to influence creative products and services into the future, right?
But here's another thing too, and you touched on that earlier on when you mentioned about when your uncle started to organize this catalog and got Virgin Records to sign a deal with Virgin Records. Basically, what was happening is that Virgin Records was signing a deal to get in on the action, right? And not so much to protect him, but to really get a piece of the deal. Because what's happening now is, or what has happened with the reggae industry is that here it is, all of this came out of Jamaica, right? So when you look at this, the size of that pie, you know, the size of that reggae pie, right, globally, right? Jamaica is just getting a meager slice out of that pie, right? And the bulk of that pie really belongs to the big, you know, the big distributors
the industry,
yeah. Yes. You know, that is outside of Jamaica.
But look at Red Stripe.
Can we bring Ratigan into the discussion?
Look at what is happening now in globalization. Yeah, go ahead.
Ratigan.
Yeah, man, I hear you.
You've been silent, my brethren. No question for Maxine? Because I know you're a music man, you know.
No, I've been silently listening and being educated by Maxine. So, you know, the only question I have is, Maxine, what in retrospect, what's been your biggest challenge throughout your career in the music industry? And as a producer, as a director, all of that, what's been the biggest challenge you faced? And how did you overcome it, if you did?
The biggest challenge is understanding Jamaica and how it really works, you know. I have an emotional and spiritual connection with Jamaica, and have had to recognize that, you know, infrastructurally it works against the people that I'm attached to politically and creatively. And it, as was said, it's laws. I've begun to understand it's not, you know, it's laws and policies that would need to be changed, that they understand the nature of the people. And, you know, the politicians and the political and the elites of Jamaica are not willing to make these changes. And the creative class is not fully understanding of their oppression. And so you find yourself in between a product or a people and a governance system that is structured against it, you know? And so, you know, I find myself active now in areas like the United Nations, ECOSOC, UNESCO, you know, the international areas. I'm looking to see, you know, I see like through your agitation, you know, more closely what the diaspora is doing, how it is seeking to organize itself to be more effective, and not be like the diaspora itself is a straw sucking out the value of Jamaica inadvertently. So, you know, but you know, what is the responsibility of the diaspora to give back? And how should it give back in respect of these challenges? I mean, as a woman, I have, you know, as I described my personality coming up, you know, it's dominated by men. The career path, the areas that I trod, and yes, as a woman, I have felt the sting of that, but you know, I'm a fighter and a warrior, so I'm able to advance in spite of all of these challenges. I'm now having these challenges in music estates that I'm attached to. I know Michael came on and said, you know, people say that I'm a control freak, or, you know, and I have to understand to myself what is being stated in terms of what people think about me is more like, what am I seeking to control? You know? You know, that's it. You know, it's just that space that I have to exist in because of my knowledge and, you know, coming to an understanding that the Jamaica society is, if it's inching its way, I don't know, you know, how far it's gonna get, but that's where I am. That's my challenge, is the society and its structure.
Let me, yeah, I was just gonna add a follow-up question, because it sounds to me like, well, you mentioned challenges with the culture, the Rastafari culture, and the way women are perceived and how they're treated. You mentioned one with the system itself, the system of governance, laws, and then you mentioned one with the people who are satisfied and comfortable with the way things are, and they could care less about the people who are artists, the creative ones. They could care less about them. So, with all of these challenges, where do you see yourself, and how do you move forward? And also the challenges of, sorry, and also the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated space. So, with all of those four major challenges, how do you move forward? Do you move forward as an independent, where you just say, "Look, I'm just going to do my own thing," or do you move forward with a movement, with an organization to effect change? Because it sounds to me like you're saying all of these things need to be changed. There must be some amendment to the way these things function and how they operate. So the question I'm really driving at is what role do you foresee yourself playing in creating these changes?
Well, I do see myself engaging in the writing of books and development of a curriculum. I just had a coming together with one of my peers, not one of my peers, one of my children's peers. He has a position at Yale University in Connecticut, and he opened to me in the last month a platform for me to become a activist professor in the university, and to have a team of people to actually download all that I just expressed into technology, into books and curriculum, to invite more activism through knowledge of what is happening.
Any other question?
In that is in South Lateral. So I do see coming on the horizon some major cause campaigns and some major intellectual outputs. And I'm also in negotiation with a major record company that I've worked with in the past to partner actively with the African music industry to see how I could connect a Jamaica African, energy globally. So I see those things for myself actively. I am part of a Rastafari movement in Jamaica that, we just linked up with the African Descendant Decade, and activism on behalf of Africa, because whatever we are happening in Jamaica is happening to various African descendant communities across the globe. And so I'm at the edge also of the Jamaican situation being part of a larger movement, identifying these structural weaknesses. I guess that would be under reparations, whatever is forming as a reparations framework globally.
Maxine, take a look at what Pedro Gemot said at 6:07 p.m. Food for thought. But one last question. You see it? 6:07, you looking in the chat?
No, hold on.
Okay, all right. Well, whenever you get a chance, take a look at what Pedro Gemot said, and he's listed at 6:07. Last question. I was fortunate enough to attend a reggae symposium in Fort Lauderdale in January, and you were on the panel, and I was very impressed with the array of stars they had on the panel and the things that they had to say. What's your feeling about having something like this more frequently and across the globe instead of just having like a one-off?
We'll lose Maxine. That was an excellent question, Will. That question you raised, which Maxine responded to, not this last question, the one before, but it was an excellent question. It was right along the lines of what I was talking about, and she got it. She got it because she answered the question precisely, the way it needed to. But Maxine is sitting on a wealth of stuff there, which there's a whole lot more that Maxine could do or you know, if she can get the right resources, you know, to really develop this thing, because I think Maxine have a real good grasp of the industry and its workings.
Yeah, you know, we see her here almost on a regular basis, you know, on Sunday. But like I said, I saw her she was on a panel. It was a reggae symposium in January, and I was very, very impressed with the panel, but particularly with Maxine. And so it's almost like you said to yourself, you know, she's got so much talent. And no, I don't want to swell up her head. No. But anyway,
Maxine,
but it's like,
that
no,
last part, so much talent.
no, Maxine, I was telling them about the symposium down in Fort Lauderdale, and I was saying to
Oh yeah,
myself,
yeah.
when I listened to all of you guys speaking about, but particularly you and what you had to say, and I could see whenever your time came to speak, people were on the edge of their seats because they wanted to. In fact, I think you were the only female on the panel. Yeah, I
Yes,
think you.
yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and people just wanted to hear what you had to say, and so I was wondering, for such a remarkable person that, you know, you just there. We would love to see more of you out there, you know, talking the things that we're discussing right now, because this is about education and the future. And
Yes.
it would be such a shame to just have all of that information just vested in one person and we can't get it. You know, is there something we can do to get the message out there through you? Because your experience is unique in many respects. Nobody can tell Maxine Stowe's story. You would have to say, and your story covers a lot of stories. And what would you suggest? Do you have a plan for us to kind of like get Maxine out there to just talk about these things and educate people and inspire them?
Yes. Yes, I think, Michael and I were speaking about water. That's how we came together, really. I had this project, Dancehall 50, that encapsulated what I was just speaking about, right, in somewhat. And I was really looking for the partnerships, through the music industry, my career platforms, the labels that I'd worked with. And I was actually in Jamaica trying to put the project, not trying, the project is before Red Stripe. I thought, the liquor industry had a similar experience and is now owned, internationally. Heineken owns Red Stripe, you know what I mean? And, but Red Stripe has to be marketed out of Jamaica, And like I said, I'm interested and have been interested in the Waterhouse vibes because of the individuals and the diaspora focus that's here. So I think it's, I don't know why Michael chose to interview me in this manner today, but it's interesting because last week I had the opportunity to engage, as I said, educationally now, through Yale University, right? And I'm actually awaiting next week meetings with that program to plug in what I thought would be a project. But this one is led by education that will have me lecturing to students, but more so developing curriculums out of what I say and how I say it, that it can be replicated, through schools, through a wider audience, right? And so it's interesting that as I said, I'm being interviewed today to be asked this and to be, engaged with your collective minds, to be in, to work this out at its broadest level, and for its intention to be understood to be about music, yes, but I'm carrying so many, as you said, other people's stories from a first person relationship, meaning I went through the experience with these people who went through their experiences, and their stories are also frustrated by not coming out. Like my uncle's story has not come out yet. You understand what I'm saying? And he's now, 20 years, right? So the weight is really, as you said, on me. But I did engage a mechanism last week, through Yale University, which I'm actively pursuing, and I'm further encouraged by your comments
But
that I
Maxine,
should do this.
if I can just comment on what you just said, because I was mentioning earlier on, right? Just when you were not on, that
Just a
that
comment.
question that Will posed was
Maxine,
excellent, and then the way you responded to it.
you
But
talk about a lot of
Last,
one,
last,
one,
changes
one,
that
one
needs
second,
hold on.
1 second,
to
the last.
take place in the music industry
Last,
to make
last,
the
Patrick, stop.
music
Last,
industry more
I want you black here. You hearing last?
right.
Yeah,
give me a
Patrick,
minute.
hold
Give
Yes,
me 1 minute there. Yes,
you're not
Maxine.
hearing me.
Now I'm asking for just give me 1 minute. Just give me a minute. Maxine, you hearing me, Maxine?
I'm listening.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was saying that you are spot on in terms of just about everything that not only needs to be done, but what is being said. What? Yeah, everything that you have said, right, and about the industry and all of that. How about in terms of that curriculum you mentioned about curriculum development with that university in Connecticut? How about approaching the university in Jamaica, right, and having them develop, right, in association with you, having them develop a curriculum for Jamaicans, right, because that is a career move, right? That can be a career move for Jamaicans. Plus, the other factor is that one of the things you have brought out is that this thing is much wider, much broader than one imagine, because you're talking about entertainment. Entertainment is one of the biggest industries in the world. The entertainment industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
It touch on sports, it touch on just about every area, right? And the merchandising and the marketing and all of that. So in you developing a curriculum and all of that, you wouldn't only be developing a curriculum around the music industry,
It's creative
right?
industry.
Right. But also you'd also be touching on areas which need to be addressed, like in terms of developing laws. Jamaica doesn't have
Yes.
entertainment lawyers and all of that. You need all of that you need, because you need laws developed. You also need entertainment lawyers out there to protect the interests of people.
Patrick, hold on a minute. Maxine, we are getting a feedback from you.
Yes.
Maxine.
If you could give me a few minutes and let me change from my phone to my computer
Yeah, go
to see
ahead,
if
go
I
ahead.
get a better. Yeah. All right. So just give me
Go
a few
ahead,
minutes.
go ahead.
Let me change it.
Yeah. Maxine has a wealth of information and knowledge,
Yes, yes.
but nobody, I don't know, all they don't tap into her. I think it probably has to do with the politics of the period, because I figured the Reggae Studies unit at UWI would develop something like this. I don't know why they haven't done so as yet.
Because of colonialism. It's not something that's on the agenda. It has never been on the agenda for us to control our own stuff. Right? And this is the same point I've tried to make, even as it comes to the Constitution. The Constitution is not our Constitution, because it was never designed for us. It's just a continuation of the old colonialism to maintain control. The one fundamental thing that has not changed between prior to 62 and after 62
You see,
is that the principle remain the same. The principle is still the crown, right? So we still have allegiance to the crown. We still remain in allegiance to the crown. It's not our constitution, right? And it's the same principle here. Everything that we do, if you notice, even with certain industries collapsed after independence. The sugar industry collapsed. The banana industry collapsed. All of these things collapsed. It don't mean that banana is not needed anymore. It don't mean that sugar not needed anymore, right? But it means that because the colonialists has backed away from it, right? Nothing happens. Right? It's the same thing with our music industry. We produce the musicians, we produce the music and all of that, but we have no control about it.
Lass, you wanted to say something.
Patrick, I think part of the problem is the I think part of the problem is the perspective that our society have on our music and our culture.
Yes.
Like it is like the music and the culture to the policymakers is like a subsidiary of the tourism market. It is there to serve the tourism product. It's not there to create ownership.
Right.
It is not there to create a viable, lifelong style for the people who are producing our culture and our music. As long as there's people there to serve the tourism market and we get some people in and we boast about Jamaica, you know, how many tourists coming here. I mean, they don't concern themselves with the ownership structure of the business.
You're
Maxine
absolutely
talk
right.
about
You're absolutely right.
those music industry operators who moved away in the 1970s. Has any government since the 1970s ever had any kind of dialogue with these people to find out what is it about our system that forces you as Jamaican producers in the heart of where reggae is produced to move out of the system, right? This is where the majority of the reggae product is from. But you as producers move away and have to go abroad, right? To function as a business. Has any government ever tried to understand that and to develop policy to try and get these people to have a bigger foothold in the country?
They don't think in that way.
I doubt
They
that.
don't think in that
So I just believe they see it as a it's just a pulling card for tourists.
Yeah.
That's how they see it.
You're absolutely right, Lass. You're absolutely right, because it's the same thing with the tourist industry, right? It's just like like you said, as a subsidiary, right? It operates more like a subsidiary, because what happens is that, again, we're not supposed to be privy to control and all of them type of things, right? And this is how the industry
I have a
actually
question for
develops.
Max. I have a question for Maxine too. Maxine,
I'm hearing you.
you hear me, Maxine? Yes. You mentioned earlier in your talk about those the VP, the Randys and Coxon who moved away. I wanted to ask you, did you ever get a chance to reason with these players to find out what was it? What is it about the space in Jamaica that caused them to move and to feel that they're better centered outside of the country?
The flight,
as industry players.
the flight of the middle class or whatever class in the late 70s, the political violence, the lack of ability to get raw materials into Jamaica at the time. Like for my uncle, like he couldn't get the vinyl because of the foreign exchange issues. You know, this is late 79, 78, 79, 80, when there was this major transition that not even, I think it hasn't been dealt with in the society, what that departure did for the economy of Jamaica, you know, what left and what didn't come back, and what effect it has had on the economy, you know?
There was more to it than that too. There was a lot more to it than that. But you touch on a key point here, like when you mention about the violence and so on. Because remember now, what was happening at the time was that there was a squeeze on the Jamaican economy, because what took us into
we can understand that perspective, but what I'm trying to get at now, since that time, Maxine, has ever been in dialogue with the government or the powers that be in terms of policies to try and, you know, center the thing back in Jamaica, or as, you know, the policymakers ever attempted?
That was the whole concept of the Jamaica Music Museum, because you need a macro entity. You need a macro entity in order to engage the international music industry, right? And you're not going to get the players like the PP and all of these people to come back into Jamaica. There's no rationale based on what they have developed for themselves in the diaspora, for them to put back the headquarters into Jamaica. So you would have to develop a large scale ownership structure for the music in Jamaica, which my premise of being there was that Jamaican artists had given away their copyrights to the international market over these years. However, the majority of it left out Jamaica and the Caribbean in the deals that were done. So my premise was that Jamaica, owning the rights for Jamaica and the Caribbean, should have set up an institution, which was the Jamaica Music Museum, that would hold all these copyrights, but more importantly, hold how the creative process actually occurred, not how the business process occurred, but how the creative process occurred, and be able now to go into a new era of storytelling, right? Attached to the music, attached to the new technology of digital and streaming, and create an economic joint venture, you know, to bring the international music system into Jamaica. Without the international music system coming into Jamaica with their access to capital, because local capital will not invest in what local capital is not going to make money out of. You understand?
Right.
So, in my understanding, you have to create a plugin for the international into Jamaica, which I think the logic is organizing the creative basis of how the music was done, and the lives and the estates, and, you know, that was the plan that I had put forward. And that the largest owner of intellectual property music externally, by Universal, who, you know, owns the Bob Marley and the island and Trojan catalogs should have been encouraged now to be the partner, right? But as someone said, the politics of it didn't suit the ministries of cultures, right? Because I got to understand, wow, that the Ministry of Culture's job is to suppress the people, right? And why I'm saying that, I just read an article on South Africa coming out of apartheid last 30 years. And while you have political freedom, the economics of South Africa is still owned by the whites. And they had an overview on the 30 years since apartheid and what has happened. You have a certain amount of mobility of the elite, but the majority of the South Africa people and population are not engaged in the economics. And so I understand that Jamaica has a similar economic apartheid system where the majority of the economy is held by a minority of the people, and that minority is not inclined to invest in these industries, right? So, that's why I said that as Will said, the diaspora and just Jamaicans understanding their economics, if they can attach themselves to economically understand and have vehicles to invest. Like I think at one point we were trying to get the Jamaica diaspora, for example, to invest in the ganja industry. You understand? I don't know where that went. It was just something that is on the horizon. But instead you have like the Canadians, you have the, California people coming in to invest, but the Jamaicans have the ability to invest from their international platforms and access, But like I said, globalization has taken over. There's so much of our Jamaica. I mean, Jamaica is so owned by outside capital. I don't know if somebody has a current diagram or, of what is actually owned by Jamaicans in terms of our products and services. And so how should we as Jamaicans now be thinking through or organizing ourselves? I don't know, because, like I said, every major entity, cement, etc., is owned by outside capital, So that's why I think education and to be educated on how the economy works, how capital works, we need to understand that more as quote unquote Jamaicans on the rock, because
Maxine, a kind of personal question. Do you have a working staff?
not yet.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, not yet.
I thought so.
Okay.
Not as yet, and there's no but. My trajectory of my work and my activism has created a certain, blueprint. I'm at the state now of so much value, like it's like a volcano that is erupting. The idea about the University of the West Indies, for me, being in Jamaica, the University of the West Indies itself does not have the, what they call it, like the money that you get from your endowment. You understand? University of the West Indies suffering from all, just like Red Stripe or anything else, to me, right? And so though it sits as a structure, it doesn't have the monetary capacity to really what these other universities have. You understand what I'm saying? They have endowments that allow a greater opportunity to assist us, especially since our music is known to have benefited these countries so much. You understand? It's not a big leap to get these universities to invest, and based on who is in charge of the investment, to share those curriculums or information with the University of the West Indies. So I don't, I'm all for the Jamaican society to benefit. Obviously, I've spent so much time here in Jamaica and I'm on the ground fighting through various, struggles, but I do realize that I have to engage my diaspora side, definitely.
Yeah. Maxine, would you say then, like the ganja industry, the other industry, or even more coffee that the small man grows, where the price they've been bought out and the price driven down to almost unmanageable level where they can't live off the sales that they're making with coffee. Seems like our people are not astute enough or adaptable enough to grasp the business side of things. They can grow it, but they can't do the business side, right?
That's because they've never been acclimatized to doing business.
There you
That's
go.
the problem.
Yeah.
Business,
So,
doing business is a creative process,
yeah.
and that is the aspect of us that has been most suppressed. For us not to be creative, it's like you mentioned, Maxine, in terms of not having the endowment, not having the funding. But really, money is not creative. We are creative. We are natural by nature. We are creative, right? And that's
It's not the
what we need
creative,
to
it's what the creative needs to move from the creative into the manufacturing. Look at ganja.
Yeah, but it's not money
Nobody
that
can
does it.
grow ganja, but who can own a processing plant?
I'll
to
give
be-
you an example.
Mhm.
Right? If you look at the tourist industry, for example, right? When they talk about tourist investment in Jamaica, right, and the big hotels coming down and all of that, you think they're coming down with money? They don't come down with money. The hotels and all of these things is what Jamaica bill on credit, right? They bill that on credit and then bring them in to run it, operate it and all of that, and then make them profit and all of that. That is why they can always walk away and leave us standing. Because the investors don't really bring money. What they bring is they bring their business acumen. That's what they bring.
Well, that's money.
That's not money.
No, what I'm saying when I said it's money, meaning I'm trying to understand
It's
what you're
value.
saying.
Yes.
They bring for example, if you go and get a loan for do a business plan, you are getting money based on future or credit based on your futures, right? Based on how you write your business plan and you project futures based on, a multiple of what you may
your
be doing at the moment.
estimates as to what you're going to gain in the future.
Right.
Right.
Yes,
it's
but
very-
here's the piece. Here's the piece that I'm getting at, which is what a lot of people don't get, right? When it comes to how capitalism works, right? They try to put it out to you that money is value. Money is not value. Money is not value. Money is simply a measure, an attempt to measure value. But money is not value itself, right? Credit is really what they use, right? And credit is an agreement. Because credit is really what precedes money.
okay. So how do you get the credit? Credit is not equally
Credit is the agreement.
easily available.
No, but credit is the agreement. Credit is not something tangible where okay, it's something you get that you're gonna use to exchange. No, you get the credit based on, it's like, for example, when I say credit precedes money, right? Before you had the dollar bill and all of that, it was what was called a promissory note. So it was credit. It was saying that I don't have what I need to pay you now, right? But this is the agreement that I have. This is a certified agreement that you can use, right, to as a means of transaction. Otherwise, not just with me, but you can use it as a means of transaction. Otherwise, so that's what credit is, right? Credit is transferable, right? So it seems like money, but it's not money, because money itself is not a value. It's really an agreement.
Well, we live in an unequal, inequitable society, right? And what we're speaking about is the people who have the labor, the consumption, and the ideas, who don't have access to either capital or credit, right?
Yes.
And negotiating, I know that the whole concept of intellectual property as an asset is the new money, is the new value, right? And the idea of giving you money that is not tied to real estate. This is what I understand in the Jamaica situation. That the banks or the lenders, etc., they only lend on those type of assets. They don't lend on creative ventures, right? And so where we are located as a people in the creative industry, we don't have access to that credit. We just don't. You understand?
I understand that. I understand what you're saying quite clearly. Right? But what I'm saying to you is, right, we don't have the credit because we don't have the agreement. But all credit is an agreement. That's all it is.
I understand what you're saying, but the agreement, who are we going to have the agreement with?
No, and that is the fundamental question now, right? Because you're talking now about who your creditors are going to be, right? And if our bank is going to be your creditor, the bank need a business. So if you have a lucrative business, if you have a lucrative idea, right, there is no reason for the bank to reject you, right? Because it means income for them as well.
Yeah, but if your income is generated externally in markets abroad,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, it hasn't happened.
The biggest problem is that people don't understand what money is. That's where the problem lies.
They mean the poor people don't understand it, or the
don't understand it. For the most part, people don't understand. You have people who do economics and don't understand money.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We've been going at this now 2.5 hours.
Yes.
I want to go around and have each of you give your final remarks. Last, you want to start it? Patrick, final remarks.
Yes. I really love this discussion because
I want to say to Maxine is that with the background, with the knowledge, Maxine, I wish there is some way that you can influence the policymakers, because this is what we have been talking about and what you have been leading us into has a lot to do with policy and culture, policy and the economy, the overall, how we see ourselves as a people and the stuff that we create, and how to give it as much value as possible. And the policymakers have a big part to play in this. I hope some of them are listening to you in your talks, more and more and get a better perspective. Because I'm sure a lot of them just don't have the perspective that you have. So I hope some of them can get some influence from what you're saying.
Before you go ahead, Herb alert me to some questions in the chat. Herb, you want to speak to those questions? What were the questions?
Well, I think one of them wanted to know why Patra dropped out. That was a key question early on. And they figure Maxine could answer that.
Yeah.
You heard that one, Maxine?
Maxine?
Yeah, Patra, Shaba and Patra were not tied, they were both managed by the same organization.
That was kept down.
Yes, Pekshang. And when Shaba ran into trouble with the gay lobby and, fell off the mark, not just him alone, quite a few of them fell off. I think him being the leading, asset of that organization, it affected her,
Could she have switched and come out with a new image?
Maybe the agreements that she signed with Pekshang did not allow for that. I know that I know that in my work at the labels, again, the Jamaican artists didn't oftentimes have a lot of space in terms of representation, legal representation, And so, just like hip hop artists as well, you know what I'm saying? They signed deals that were not necessarily to their benefit. And so they couldn't, they would have to drop out maybe for years to get free and then come back again, Yeah. So I know a lot of artists, as we all know, the artists and the producers in Jamaica have a very strained economic relationship, especially in the dancehall. The whole history of Jamaican music, really. There's a challenge, So I do know, though, that Patra, situation was tied to Shaba and, what happened overall for the music with the gay lobby.
Did Maxine ever meet
any other question?
Yeah, I just gave it to her. Did Maxine ever meet King Tubby?
No. Maybe I did, but not like I went to King Tubby's with Sugar when he was recording, but I never met him personally to have a discussion with him, link up with him. But I'm aware of him through my journey with Sugar in the various studios.
The last one is Maxine the same radical as she was back then? Can you turn it on now if you had to?
Would I what? Would I what?
Could you get as radical as you were in the past? Your radicalism. Could you turn it back on and I guess in your approach to the control of reggae music around the world? You say you want to put it back.
If you scratch the surface of my, I have to think of myself too. That's why I think I have to go to Yale and not UWI.
Okay, I got you.
because I'm considered very radical in the Jamaica situation in relation to even the Rastafari community. I'm, seen as too radical for them.
Right.
So I'm thinking that when Michael say, "Oh, she wants to," they say she's a control person. I might change the word control to radical.
Okay, I got you.
So it's not even radical. The logic, if the logic isn't there, I'm not going to compromise. And we need collective decisions now, collective activities, not individual. A lot of what is needed is collective responses, but people are approaching it from how does this affect me individually? If I thought about that, how I was being affected individually, I would have come off the front line,
Yeah.
a long ago, to be, in a little bit more retreat mode and not be on the firing line as I am. But I'm at the United Nations. I in my organization within the Rastafari community was the first organization to file an alternative report to the Convention to Eliminate Racial Discrimination that Jamaica has been a signatory to from the 60s. Yet still not one civil society group out of Jamaica has filed, it's just a government filing its report that it's doing well, that it do this, it do that. There's no voice out of Jamaica in these international United Nations spaces. And actually, when I meet with the United Nations personalities, they said to me that Jamaica is one of the tamest societies in relation to rights. Um, because these are diplomats that travel to other countries, and to the experience of Jamaica as a cultural superpower with our Bob Marley and all of that. Our activism as people on the ground, I don't know if they inoculate the people down there or whatever, but I am, I'm surprised even within the Rastafari community, how tame, or fearful. I don't know. Everybody say, aren't you fearful? They try to come at me to say, don't push this agenda, don't push that agenda. You're stepping on toes or whatever. But,
But
it is
see,
recognized that Jamaican's civil society is tame,
let me
weak.
say this. Let me say this in regards to that, Maxine. When we took over our diaspora from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they had been dealing with some tame people, as Ratty likes to say. That's our father and our grandfather and grandmother's society you're dealing with before. This new society in the diaspora, we have to look at the law and we have to apply the law the way it needs to be applied. Nobody in Jamaica is going to rise up. I've been trying this with football for the longest while because, according to the United Nations and FIFA, football is the foundation of just about every nation on the face of this earth. When you are successful at playing football, when you have organized football, then your people are more disciplined and are more organized. And Jamaica refuses to do that all these years. And now they come with this tameness project star that they want to organize. They're not organizing. They're trying to justify because we pressure them. Where's the monies? The $3 billion that you have had in loans and funding over the last 5 years. Where did it go? Right? And I'm not even talking about our remittances. I'm talking about separate monies that they have received. And one of the culprits in this is Babsy Grange and her Ministry of Culture. Because she jumped up and down the other day when we pressured the JFF I said, oh, I gave the JFF $4 million to help the woman. Now the woman had to go do a GoFundMe. And then they had the nerve to come ask Sidella Marley for money so that they could fly the woman in business class 17 hours to play football. You can't fly 17 hours with your foot hooked up under you in coach. Now, if they had the 4 million, the question is, where did the money go? We asked them that question at JFF level. We asked the government the question, where did all that billions of dollars go that you had in loans that everybody was supposed to get their share under COVID, but then you put requirements out there that everybody must have a computer, they must have bandwidth, they must have all this. Where did poor people get money to go get bandwidth on computers? I mean, this is the kind of nonsense that they're doing down there. They're going to, preventative measures that deny people their rights. And we can't get ahead because our people not going to get ahead with the ganja unless they can take charge of it. And they're not going to get ahead with this music unless somebody like you is steering them in the right direction. So we need leadership. That's what's missing.
Okay.
There's too much corruption, period. Corruption at every level, in every organization. I don't want to get carried away.
Not just leadership, Herb. Proper leadership. Because that makes a difference.
There you go.
We have to recognize.
All right, gentlemen. Gentlemen and women. I have to exercise some leadership now. Okay. Ratigan, final word.
Yeah, let me just thank you for having me on the program again. And let me just add some things to what Herb said about the diaspora. And it just goes to show the shortcomings of this diaspora relationship with the government of Jamaica, because they're having a conference in Jamaica the 16th to the 19th, and it's a business conference. And Maxine, you should be a speaker there because this is an issue that affects poor people. Most of the artists coming out of Jamaica, they're poor people. They've always been poor people, but they've always been creative. And there's never been a consistent attempt to inform them of their rights and to help them to develop not only the creative part of their lives, but the business aspect of it. And that's why now you're running around trying to, enlighten people about, production rights and this rights and intellectual property rights and all of this stuff, because they've never been taught that. On our conference, I'm going to personally invite you now to come on. It's the 16th through the 19th at night from 7 to 10. June 16th through 19th. We're dubbing it the People's Conference, which is separate and apart from the government's business conference, which is being held in the morning because they're selling products, services, and telling people to come and invest. They're not talking about issues affecting poor people like water, health, education, security, so on and so forth. So we're having speakers coming in at night and say, look, we're going to talk about the real issues affecting the Jamaican people, and we're going to come up with solutions to help them. So I just wanted to add that piece to it, because you're uniquely positioned. You have one foot in the diaspora, and you have one, another foot, the other foot in Jamaica. You're well aware of the issues surrounding the music industry, and this is them say poor people are just certain things them do because them don't have education. Them are athlete or them are artists. Them are the two outlets where them seek in the absence of an education. Now, as far as you, the person, is concerned, no, Maxine, I see you as a repository for our music, the industry, our culture, and in all honesty, you should be declared a national treasure. That's a title that's bestowed upon people with certain characteristics that the government says, these are people that we need to look at the equivalent of our national heroes. But you're living, most of the heroes, and they're dead before you become a hero. So we could call them national treasure while you're alive. So, but we need that because, and my personal view again is that the youth should be given a chair instead of you go heal. You should be given a chair at the University of the West Indies and also a position within the Ministry of Gender, Culture, or culture, gender, and entertainment. That's where you should be, to encourage, to educate, and to inspire youths, our future. So I take off my hat to you, and much respect and much continued success. Continue what you're doing. Love you, sis.
All right. Good. Thanks.
Yes.
Patrick,
Yeah.
your turn.
Maxine, I tell you, I lift my hat to you. Right. And I know in a completely new way today. Right, which is just so tremendously valued. You never even begin to understand how much I value this discussion today. Right? But what I want to say to you is this, right? Taking you back to that point about Yale and University of West Indies and all that, is that why Yale would be quick to offer you that is because Yale can appreciate and understand the value you bring. Right? What would make University of the West Indies hesitate to give you what you need is that they fail to understand the value that you bring. And that is the key. The key is the value. A lot of times, this is where people lose it. They misunderstand what real value is. You have a wealth of value right there, right? That you can market it anywhere. Just where you know, right there, can be marketed anywhere. But you have to know how to package it.
Yeah.
Right? So I just want to leave that with you for you to understand that what we're talking about is moving this thing to a different level. And this is only the start, because we definitely have to follow up on this.
Yes. We will.
Herb,
Yeah.
Michael is going to make sure of that.
Michael, you on loan somewhere of our warm time, because we on loan sometime now.
okay, well, that's why. Maxine, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, my sister. I want to thank you. I heard the feedback with regards to Yale and what you're doing there. I sort of have a different take on the whole thing. I believe strongly that what is happening at the UWI is a weird situation, because you have a lot of folks at UWI preaching about reggae music and what have you. And none of them have ever gone to a dance hall. None of them know that they have that dance hall experience. So, Maxine, in my house, I have over 20 dissertation on reggae. You understand me? 20 dissertation on reggae I have here. So when you're ready, you tell me, I can give you access to that. You understand? And Patrick, we definitely should continue this, because I think we just touched the surface. We didn't go deep dive, because Friday was celebrated as International Publishing Copyright Day.
Yeah, yes.
Friday and that's something we haven't touched on. We touched on somewhat, but we're going to definitely continue the engagement, because this is a topic of importance. So, of importance people want to earn from them work. And most of Jamaican reggae artists, them don't have no pension. Their works is what ensured them a pension. And if somebody at Universal or VP record, any record company, just a control people works, and if people are denied their right, then that's a serious problem. The politics of Jamaica
Jamaica
does not
wasn't
allow.
a Jamaica Music Museum in so many decades of international success, and you only have personal
No,
museums, a Valley Museum, you know? Why Jamaica
no,
don't
the
have
problem is no, because the problem is the politics of it. While they're
politics?
talking about it, there's an idea to buy Roger Stephan Museum, and that will become the Jamaican Museum. You know, Roger Stephan, the Bob Marley collection that he has. There's a move to sort of turn that into the museum. You know, there are so much thing we can talk about, but for every season there's a reason. You know, and
Well, I'm looking forward to Will's proposal to appear at the Diaspora Forum, and Herb also
yeah,
has a Caribbean Week proposal.
Caribbean American.
Right.
June,
So I think that's also in June, right?
yeah, June, the week of the 13th to be exact, 13th of June.
Okay.
And
Then
Maxine,
we'll have the demonstration
yeah,
on the 15th.
Yeah.
and
So I think
Maxine,
it's like convergence. We can, you know.
Yeah.
I'm appealing to the rebel in you. I'm appealing to the what them say you were a radical.
Yeah,
Radical in,
Radical.
yeah,
radical
come
first.
out. I'm appealing to the radical in you to come out and attend our march
When is
against
that?
bad governance. It will be at 42nd Street and 2nd Avenue on May 10th. It will be a week from this coming Friday. If you
Okay.
can, please. If you cannot, encourage people to come out.
Okay, I will.
All right.
yeah,
And we'll have a
and
t-shirt for
I'm
you. Whether you come or not, we'll have a t-shirt for you.
Okay.
and I'm encouraging all the listeners to go out to this demonstration because it's very important that the
Yes.
Jamaican government understand that they can't stay in Kingston and control us in America. It can't work that way. You know,
Yeah, it's not.
it now
You lose the
it not
money.
gonna work. It not gonna work. You can't
It's
stay
not
in
gonna
Kingston
work.
and think you can control Jamaicans in foreign. When you couldn't control it when we were in Jamaica, I know you're trying to control it overseas. So, Rattigan, keep the fire burning, my brethren.
Yeah, man.
You understand me? All right, sir. Until
All
next
right.
week,
Bless up.
remember,
Next week.
All right.
like and
Bless.
share and subscribe.
Good.
All right?
Good.
What
Cool.
Bless.
good.
All right. Bless up, Patrick. Bless.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
done.